Good morning, Bernie Bobcats. This is Miss Carlson here. I hope you're having a lovely Monday morning so far. I am here for your quadrilateral math lesson video for today. So last week, if you watched on Wednesday and Thursday, we had two quadrilateral lessons. On the second one on Thursday, that was when we started to break apart the different quadrilaterals we're going to be learning about. So we talked about squares and rectangles. On Wednesday, we kind of went over a big, broad thing of what is a quadrilateral. So I want you to think to yourself, you did a couple days of it last week. Think about what a quadrilateral is. How would you define that to someone around you? If you have someone around you, share that with them. If you have a piece of paper with you, write down what you know about a quadrilateral. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds while I get everything ready for our video today. So what do you know about a quadrilateral? All right, so I hope you wrote some awesome things about what you know about quadrilaterals and how we would define them. Today, our learning target is I can classify quadrilaterals. So we're going to talk about what that word classify means. We're going to talk more about what quadrilaterals are. Today, I figured out how to share my sound with you on Zoom, so you should be able to hear the video. This is not a video that Ms. Carlson made. This is one that an awesome teacher named Dylan Peters made. It's on YouTube. So I think you just type in the quadrilateral song, but I'm going to play it for you. It's just catchy. It kind of reminds you of the definition. So here's our quadrilateral song.
Four sides and they all meet. My angles add up to 316. I have so many identities. Whoa. Parallelogram has two pairs, a parallel and equal lines. A rectangle is one with the right angles on the inside. A square is one special case with all the sides being the same length. And we are all quadrilaterals. Classifying. We are made of four sides, 360 on the inside. Like a square, with the square swaying to this beat. A trapezoid only has one pair of parallel lines that never meet. They're so different, but they share a common polygonal family. They are both quadrilaterals. Classifying. We are made of four sides, 360 on the inside. Parallelogram, parallelogram, trapezoid. Quadrilateral, quadrilateral,
All right, so I hope you could hear that. I'm going to change my volume now and share it back. I might have to make it smaller. There we go. Okay, so right here you get the definition of a quadrilateral. It's a four-sided polygon. And if you remember from Wednesday's video last week, we talked about polygons. How polygons are two-dimensional, meaning they're flat, plane shapes that have straight sides that all connect. So there's no open sides. circles are not polygons because they don't have any straight lines, okay? So polygons, a square is a polygon, but you also have polygons that have 5 sides. Those are called pentagons, but those are not quadrilaterals because quadrilaterals have 4 sides and 4 angles, okay? So I'm gonna stop my share on this one. So your lesson plans for today, you have a word problem warm-up, and as you know, the word problems are not based on quadrilaterals this week. They're more different types of word problems: multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Any of the 4 operations could be used. It's up to you to solve them. So that's your little warm-up. Then you have this video to watch, and you have some worksheets at the bottom. So I'm going to show you those. Oh, yes, sorry, they're right after it. So here's your Monday math work today. So here's their I can statement up here. Ours is just I can classify quadrilaterals. So here's the different quadrilaterals we're going to talk about. Now we've talked about rectangles and squares. So today Ms. Carlson's going to talk about parallelograms, trapezoids, and rhombuses. And then over here, here's a little mystery quadrilateral search. So you're going to look at number 1. You're going to figure out which number you think fits it. So we're going to go over those definitions. And then here's one more. You're simply going to look at the shapes and decide, are they quadrilaterals or are they not? So for today, I've got our PowerPoint. I did want to go over just a few vocabulary words with you. So here's some words that you're going to come across as we are doing our lesson today. So this is kind of like your vocabulary sheet. We were doing it in our math journals. This is on your lesson plans at the very bottom under additional resources. All right, so a quadrilateral is any shape with 4 sides. We know it has 4 sides and it has 4 angles. We know also that parallel lines are lines in a plane that never cross. So last week we talked about parallel lines. They can go in any direction as long as they go in the same direction and continue to never cross. So even if you see a shape like a triangle, they touch at the top. But on a trapezoid you're going to see today, and you might think, oh, well, these lines aren't going to cross, so they're parallel. But if you kept drawing those lines, eventually they would cross up at the top. Those are not parallel lines, okay? Those would be considered our perpendicular lines. So those are when lines intersect to form 4 right angles. So perpendicular. Intersecting is when they just cross paths, but the angles can be less than 90 degrees or greater than 90 degrees. But perpendicular lines cross at some point. Parallel lines never do. You know, an angle is when you have 2 line segments where they meet and it's measured by degrees. That video talks about how squares or quadrilaterals, all of their angles add up to 360. That's something you'll go further into 4th grade. But if you have a square, and we talked about how they have those little boxes, those mean 90-degree angles. So think if they have 90-degree angles, there are 4 of them. If you added 90, 90, 90, 90, or 90 times 4, you should get 360 because the whole shape of a square is 360 degrees on the inside. You also have this definition down here, which is congruent. You will see that on your sheet tonight. So congruent ones means that they're the same length. So for example, a square has 4 congruent sides. That means if one side of a square is 4 inches, the other side is 4 inches, the other side is 4 inches, the other side is 4 inches. A rectangle, if you remember talking, the rectangle has 2 pair of congruent sides. So on a rectangle, these 2 sides are the same length, and these 2 sides are the same length. So congruent means the same length or width on 2 or more sides. For example, a square or a rectangle. So those are just some vocabulary words you might see on our lesson today or on the sheets that you're working on. All right, so here is our PowerPoint. So quadrilaterals. Oops. Let me close out and start over. There we go. Quadrilaterals. So there are many different types of quadrilaterals. We use them by identifying their sides and angles. So we talked about sides, and now we talked about angles, where 2 lines meet and they're measured by degrees. So you have 90-degree angles, which are the ones that you're going to see most in 3rd grade. So here's some more reviewing. All polygons are made up of line segments and angles. The line segments create quadrilaterals will be parallel, perpendicular, intersecting. So the purple shape is showing the parallel lines. The green shape is showing you perpendicular lines. They make a 90-degree angle. And then intersecting lines are on the red shape. The angles that make up polygons will be right angles, acute angles, or obtuse angles. We are focused mostly on just looking and seeing that they have 4 angles in 3rd grade, but you will see shapes that have the little square inside the square. And remember, that means 90 degrees. They are perfectly 90 degrees. Anything less than 90 degrees, we call that acute. Anything greater than 90 degrees, we call that obtuse. All right, so we did squares on Wednesday. So a square is a quadrilateral that has 4 equal sides and 4 right angles. So here's that word congruent right here. Let's see how it's used. It says this square has 4 right angles and all 4 sides are congruent. In parentheses, it says the same length, so they're all equal. How many pairs or sets of parallel sides do you see? So think to yourself, how many is in a pair? 2. You have 2 pair of shoes, you have 2 pair of ears, 2 pair of eyes. So on the square, you should see 1 pair, these 2 lines, the top and bottom are parallel, and 2 pair, the sides are parallel. So it has 2 pair of parallel sides, a square. Okay, just to recap, we talked about a rectangle. So a rectangle is a quadrilateral that has 2 pair of parallel sides that are equal and 4 right angles. So the difference between a square and a rectangle is that a square has all 4 sides that are congruent. On a rectangle, 2 sides are congruent and 2 sides are congruent. But a square and a rectangle do share some attributes. Okay, so that word attributes will come up. I like to think of characteristics when it comes to when we do that in reading. We talk about character traits. A character trait is something that describes the character. Well, attributes are how we describe shapes. We look at them and they have certain things that describe them. So for example, I see this rectangle has 4 sides. That's an attribute. It has 4 angles. That's an attribute. It also has 2 pair of parallel and congruent sides. So a square and a rectangle are very similar, except remember, a square has all 4 sides equal. A rectangle, these 2 sides are congruent. These 2 sides are congruent. All right, so here's our 3 new shapes for today. So this is a fun word to say. It's rhombuses. So a rhombus is a quadrilateral because it has 4 sides and it has 4 angles. But look at what it says. It says that it has 4 equal sides and 2 pair of parallel lines. So I really like in the video how with the song it says a rhombus is like a square swaying to the beat, because a rhombus is a square. It has very similar attributes of a square, except the angles are a little different. So if you look at these angles right here, this would not be a 90-degree angle, where a square has 4 90-degree angles. A rhombus, all the sides are equal. So if this side is 4 inches, this side is 4 inches, and this side is 4 inches, and this side is 4 inches. But it doesn't have 4 90-degree angles. So one of the attributes would not be 90-degree angles for a rhombus. One of the attributes would be it has 4 sides. All 4 sides are equal or congruent. There are 2 pair of parallel sides. So these 2 sides are parallel. These 2 sides are parallel. But it doesn't have 90-degree angles, okay? So rhombuses and squares, they share a lot of the same attributes, but they aren't exactly the same. Okay, our next one for today is a trapezoid. I'm sure you've seen these before. So a trapezoid is a quadrilateral that has 1 pair of parallel sides. So we talked a little bit about it at the beginning. So these 2 sides right here, you might think, well, Ms. Carlson, they don't touch. They're not going to cross. If I kept drawing and kept going up, 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 and up, 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 one day those lines would eventually intersect. So these are not parallel. But now down here, the top and the bottom, even though the top is a smaller line than the bottom, they're still parallel. So a trapezoid is a quadrilateral that has just 1 pair of parallel sides. That's the attribute that makes the trapezoid unique. So it has 1 pair of parallel sides. Can you identify which 2 sides are parallel? And do they have to have sides that are congruent? So remember, if they're congruent, they're equal. My question to you is, do you think this side is going to be the same length as this side? That would make them congruent. Do you think they are? If you said no, give yourself a brain kiss. This side is much smaller than this side. So a trapezoid has 1 pair of parallel lines and 4 sides. That is their 2 attributes. And our last one is the one on the video where they say parallelograms. It sticks in my mind. So a parallelogram is a quadrilateral that has two pair of parallel sides. So this quadrilateral, you might think it looks like a rectangle, but the difference is these angles right here are not 90-degree angles. So a parallelogram has two pair of parallel sides, okay? So does a rectangle. A rectangle has two pair of parallel sides. A square has two pair of parallel sides, but a parallelogram does not have 90-degree angles, okay? So after you have started to work a little bit with these different quadrilaterals, later this week, we're going to look at how some of these quadrilaterals can fall under the same family as other ones, okay? So that'll be something we'll develop into today. I just want you to have a firm understanding of attributes that these quadrilaterals hold. By looking at them, what can you see? I want you to remember the words congruent and parallel. Get used to that vocabulary. So that was my lesson for you today, to work on those types of things. Here's a couple more slides to give us a little more. This will be something we'll do tomorrow, where we can move these shapes into their correct categories based on their attributes, okay? So remember, if you need any extra help and you're working on quadrilaterals and you want to know some vocabulary, you can go to the additional resources. And then even down here, here's one more page, okay? So here's a list of all the different ones that we talked about today. We talked about trapezoids, parallelograms, rhombuses, rectangles, and squares. I like this sheet a lot because it tells you what are the attributes that these specific quadrilaterals hold. We don't talk about a kite, but that's one that you can look at just to see. So this is what we're going to talk about tomorrow. How, if you can tell, all these different arrows are going different ways because some quadrilaterals hold very similar attributes, but there's usually one or two things that make them different from the other ones, okay? So here's another one. Here's my sheet for you under vocabulary. So here's where it talks about the angles and parallel lines and what's a quadrilateral. So I hope that those resources help you with math, okay? So let me know if you have any questions. Tune in tomorrow. Tomorrow at the beginning of the lesson, we will recap the quadrilaterals we've learned. Maybe we'll play a little game with it. And then after that, I will start to help you understand how some of the quadrilaterals fall in this family and some fall in a family over here, but they all share simply very interesting attributes. So stay tuned tomorrow for your quadrilateral lesson. Have a great day.